Hi everybody, Dr. Mark Costas here, founder of the Dental Success Institute, author of the book Pillars of Dental Success. In today's episode of Weekly Dental Wisdom, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that I learned from an unlikely business that I owned prior to getting into dental school, and the lessons that I did not learn while I was getting my MBA. And that's all I have for you today. Enjoy the video, and we'll catch you next week. Take care now. Bye-bye. So we finished up the high school years, and I had a couple offers to play baseball at a couple small schools outside of LA. But against everybody's better judgment or urging, I was 155 pounds, barely 5'8" at the time. I was a late bloomer. There was one school that offered to give me a partial scholarship to play football. So even though I was a 5'8", 100 a buck and change, average speed, and I was a wide receiver, I decided to go play football, right? Not a great idea. But anyway, 3 weeks before the football season started, all the players were required to go meet with our financial advisor. I'm sorry, financial advisor, that's my sister. Our academic advisor. We didn't have any finances when I was 18 years old. Our academic advisor, okay? So we met with the academic advisor, and I had heard some scary stories about this lady. She was really stern, and I heard she was really mean, and to try to keep your conversation to a minimum because she could kind of jump at you at a moment's notice. So I went in there, and she handed me this piece of paper, and she told me to sit down in this chair across from her desk. And so I did, and I glanced down at the piece of paper, and she hadn't said anything yet, so I'm looking at this piece of paper, and it was my schedule for the upcoming semester. And I said, ma'am, I noticed that this is my schedule for the upcoming semester. May I ask, are we allowed to pick any of our own classes? And she was mad. So she pulled down her glasses to the rim of her nose, and she looked over the top of her glasses and said, look, my job is to make sure that you stay eligible to play on Saturdays. My job is also to make sure that your class schedule doesn't interrupt with your practice schedule, your game schedule, or your travel schedule. In addition to that, I have to make sure that you get a 2.0, so this is your schedule. It's like, okay, all right. So I guess everybody was right about what they said about this lady, right? So then I gathered up enough courage in a couple seconds, and I said, okay, well, if this whole football thing doesn't work out, and there's a pretty good chance it's not going to work out based on my size, right? If this whole football thing doesn't work out, I want to be a dentist. So I want to take classes that are going to get me ready for those pre-dental classes that I'm going to eventually have to take. And she pulled down her glasses again, and I remember still exactly what she said because I wrote it down on the back of that schedule. She said to me, do you have any idea how difficult the pre-dental coursework is? I've seen your high school transcripts, and I don't believe you have the aptitude for it. Have you ever considered majoring in rec or phys ed? Can you imagine that, man? I just got to college. This is my big shot. I want to be a dentist. You should be proud of me. And she was a dream stealer, man. So she told me that no, I couldn't do it. Don't do it. But I was very persistent, and I got her to let me take a couple science classes that would help me later for the prerequisites for dental school. But I took those words that she said to me, and I filed them in the back of my subconscious. And a lot of times they were a source of insecurity. But most times they were a source of motivation because I wanted to prove her wrong. I wanted to prove her that, yeah, I could do this. I have it in me. I could figure it out. So that's where I started out. So after the first season, I had sustained a pretty serious back injury. I just recently, 3 years ago, got it fixed. I had surgery on my back. I also broke my collarbone towards the end of the season. I got some playing time, but it wasn't looking like it was going to turn into much. So I made a grown-up decision and decided it was time to turn in the cleats and focus on academics. I wanted to go back to a real school and get my bachelor's degree and go on to become a dentist. So when I got down to the University of California at San Diego, where I transferred to, I realized that now without football, I was going to have to figure out a way to pay for my tuition, right? And I realized there was 3 different types of students as far as the way that they paid for their college education. One was the full ride, mommy and daddy full ride. I didn't have the mommy and daddy full ride. Sports full ride, we know how that went. Academic full ride, that wasn't happening, for sure, based on my high school transcripts. And then the second type was the type that would they'd max out their student loans, right? They'd get student loans, and if there was any gaps in the expenditures, they'd get a part-time job, and that was taken care of that way. The third type of student was probably more like me, It was the type of student that either didn't want to take out student loans or couldn't qualify for student loans, so they decided to work their way through school. Now, as a first-generation American and an immigrant son, it was always pounded into my head that debt was bad. Debt was bad. No matter what, debt was bad. Don't borrow money. People that hold debt over you, have control over you, don't do it. As I was growing up, we paid for everything cash except for our houses. My parents were very frugal and good with their money. Very, very smart people. It was not explained to me, though, that you can leverage good debt to your benefit. And in this case, it probably would have been a better idea that I got at least some student loans, but I was stubborn. And so I decided to take the route that I was going to work full-time and put myself through school. The problem is that most people that did this took 9 years. Remember Van Wilder? It takes like 9 years to get your bachelor's. I didn't want that to be me. I wanted to finish in 4 years with my bachelor's, all of my prereqs done for dental school, and my DAT taken. And I did it. At the end of it, I had graduated with my bachelor's and all of my prereqs and my DAT. The only problem was what I didn't intend to happen was my GPA sucked because I was working so hard. Well, I wouldn't say sucked. It was a little bit better than average. Let's just say that. And my DAT scores were about average. So I had worked all this time, put myself through school for 4 years because I didn't want to waste any time and have it end up taking 8 years, and it ended up totally backfiring me. So I decided I was going to defy the math, and I was going to apply to a bunch of different schools just to improve my chances. I applied to 10 schools, and you guys all know the envelope versus packet scenario, right? Anybody that's applied to dental school knows envelope bad, packet good. Envelope, one sheet of paper. We regret to inform you that you suck and you're not invited to our class. Packet meant, okay, you're decent, we will interview you, or you're accepted. So every day I'd come back and open up the mailbox really quick. Envelope, envelope, envelope. By the end of it, 10 envelopes, 10 rejections, 0 acceptances, and no plan B. I hadn't looked beyond what I was going to do if I didn't get into dental school, right? So what the heck am I going to do now? So I have my bachelor's, right? I have my bachelor's in psychology with an average GPA. I'm going to go take the corporate world by storm. So I hire a headhunter, and we punch up my resume with my experience as a personal trainer, a bouncer at a bar, right? And a kickboxing instructor. Those are the 3 jobs that put me through dental school for 4 years, believe it or not. Working like 60 hours a week. It was crazy. So I got myself a cheap suit, bought the briefcase, pounded the pavement, went on dozens of interviews. And at the end of several months of interviewing, at the same time, I'm still working my 3-odd jobs, trying to make ends meet. At the end of all that, zero job offers, nothing, not one. Maybe they could tell that I wanted to do something else with my life. I don't know. Whatever the case was, I had failed at the dental school application thing. I had failed at the corporate world. I was at a pretty low point in my life. I was working with one of my personal trainer clients at the time. He looks up at me. We're doing a set. He looks up at me and says, "Hey, man, what's going on?" "Nah, man, I'm good." "No, seriously, what's going on? You look bummed out." "No, I'm fine, man." "What's going on?" "Well, my life sucks, dude. I just got rejected 10 times to dental school. I got no job offers after like 20 job interviews, and I got nothing going on." He's like, "Look, I work for a catering company. This might be right up your alley. I could get you a job interview with my company. We're looking for some people." And I'm thinking, catering? The only thing I know about food is that I bust tables when I'm not bouncing at the bar that I work at to help out the waitresses. I'm not qualified to work for your company, man. He's like, "No, seriously, you work well with people. I think you'd be good at it." He's like, "And besides, I'm making $400 a day cash doing this." I was like, whoa, that sounds pretty good, actually. I wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire at the time, so I thought, okay, I'll at least show up for the job interview. Okay, so I show up for the job interview, and this is what I see. Does anybody know what these are? What do you call these where y'all are from? Roach Coach, that's right. We call them Roach Coaches where I was from because I used to work construction on the summers when I was in high school, and we'd be working at the job site, and one of these things would pull up. They'd honk the horn, The driver would get out, flip the doors up, and then we would all go over and buy Doritos and burritos and Diet Cokes from the Roach Coach driver. Be like, the Roach Coach is here, the Roach Coach is here. So they were like basically a glorified ice cream man. So I pulled up to this address that this guy had given me. He didn't tell me anything about driving a Roach Coach. So I pull up, and there's 2 city blocks with about 50 of these parked out front. And true story, I drive right by. I didn't even slow down. I just drove right by. And I'm talking to myself, driving away, going, I cannot believe my life has come to this. The only thing I have going on is the potential to drive a Roach Coach. And I'm driving away thinking, okay, then my integrity kicks in, my character kicks in, and I'm thinking, okay, at least I could show up for the interview. He set the interview up. I committed to him. So I made a U-turn and went back and talked to the interviewer. The interviewer told me that they weren't looking for employees for this Roach Coach company. They were looking for franchisees. And what I would be doing is I would lease the truck from them. I would lease the route from them. I would buy all my raw materials for them, and I'd be responsible for buying my fuel, raw materials, hiring my own staff. Basically, it would be my own traveling little restaurant. I didn't know anything about food. I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know anything about anything. But I didn't have anything else going on. So I took it. So a week later, I'm the newest Roach Coach driver. At the same time, I decided that I was going to hedge my bets with dental school, and I was going to apply for my MBA because I knew that my bachelor's wasn't going to get me very far, obviously, right? So I'm getting my MBA at night. I got accepted to the University of San Diego Executive MBA program. So the Executive MBA program meant that most of the people in my classes were people that were having their MBA classes paid for by their company, right? So Fortune 500 companies would send their shining stars in to get their MBA, and they would work them up the corporate ladder, right? So all these people would be sitting in class with their suits on and their briefcases, women in business suits, and I'd walk in smelling like French fries, grease stains all over my t-shirt, baseball cap, torn jeans. And I'd sit in the back, and people would be looking at me like, man, you stink. And I didn't make a whole lot of friends that period in my life, but if you were to compare the experience of the Roach Coach versus the MBA was a huge disappointment because I was learning from PhDs about theory, nothing practical. I mean, I knew nothing about business, and I own my own business, and I'm taking business administration courses, a master's in it. You'd think that that would help me a little bit run my little Roach Coach business, right? No, not at all. I learned nothing from my MBA that was applicable to business in the real world. Nothing, zero. But I kept on taking the classes because I knew it was going to make my resume look better if I couldn't get into dental school. The Roach Coach, on the other hand, was like entrepreneurship 101. It was like literally throw you into the deep end of the water. If you sank, you were done. If you swam, if you figured it out fast enough, you were going to do really good. And none of the other drivers, they saw me as, competition. They weren't out to help me. So I figured it out. I got some business books. I figured out how to read profit and loss reports. I figured out how to manage an overhead. I figured out how to market. I figured out how to retain really good employees and how to recruit them too. I figured out business on my own, driving a Roach Coach at the same time.